Alright, what is up guys? Vivi back with another video. And today we're going to be going over part 4 of 7 in the Taking Your Game to the Next Level series. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive straight into it. And, this is going to be Gear Theory, part 4 of 7, Form 4, Ataru. Excuse me. So, as usual, guys, you know the disclaimer here. This is just my own personal opinions. I'm just trying to help the newer players get a better grasp of the game, especially players who are new to TCGs, not even just One Piece. And, for the intermediate level players to take their game to the next level. If you are at a higher level than that, then by all means, please, give some insights in the comment section below. Okay, excuse me. And like I say in all of these, this series is focused on One Piece, but a lot of these concepts will hold true across all TCGs. A lot of the things we're going to talk about are just general concepts. Okay, so real quick, let's just do a quick recap. We've already gone over Gears 1 and 2 and Gear 3 with development in mid-range. Today's video, we're halfway through the series now. We're at Gear 4. This is the production initiative aggro gear. Okay, so we've talked about how Gears 1 and 2 are very much tied together. They go hand in hand. And what we left off with on the last video is, Gears 1 and 2, excuse me, when it comes to reaching expert level, it really is kind of just a matter of time. At least for Gear 1, it's definitely just a matter of time for Gear 1 before you reach like the highest level, right? You just have to do memorization. But Gear 2, there is some limitations on how much time you have available to you to play the game and to get your reps in, your repetitions in. Well, the same thing is kind of true for Gears 3, 4, and 5 as what we were just saying for Gear 2, where if you want to reach the absolute highest level of Gears 3 through 5, it will require hours and hours of playtesting for months of your life, and maybe even years to some extent of playing TCGs, depending on how far along you are in playing TCGs. That's just the truth of it, guys. A lot of the players that you see that win the big tournaments, they are players who, not all of them, it's not always true, excuse me, but a lot of them are people who have been playing TCGs for the better part of like 10 plus years, okay? Now, like I said, some of them are younger, and it doesn't mean you can't win if you're not, if you don't have that many years of experience. It's not to say that, but it's just to say that everyone works at a different pace, and everyone has different potential. Everyone is unique and has their own, limitations. But when it comes to the expert levels of, being like an absolute top tier mid-range player or aggro player or control player, it's going to take some time, right? It takes, and you might think like, oh, no, I'm really good. Well, you might be really good, but are you at the highest level? That's what it comes down to. Because there is a pretty decent gap between an expert player and an intermediate level player. Okay, there just is, and it's nothing against anyone. It is what it is, right? Like the old classical saying there, cliche saying there. So okay, let's go ahead and dive into it. Let's talk about aggro now. So aggro is going to be a lot of fun to talk about. We're going to be talking about production. We're going to be talking about initiative and aggression in the early game. So real quick, I got to go back here real quick for the mid-range stuff. Excuse me. In Gear 3, we were talking about learning how to make a balanced deck list, how to fashion tempo, and how to ultimately outdevelop our opponent. We want to develop into a stronger board state than them. Well, in Gear 4, that's not the case. In Gear 3, it was all about quality over quantity. Gear 3 is kind of the opposite. It's more about quantity over quality. And it's about initiative and aggression in the early game. We want to establish a very tough board state for our opponent to deal with, where they don't have time to set up in the mid and late games. Like, nope, I'm developing something, a threat that you're going to have to answer right now, right? That's the idea here. So first thing to talk about, let's talk about what is an attack threshold. What is an attack threshold when people talk about that? If people talk about that wherever you live. Well, the first part of an attack threshold has to do with the leader's power, the leader's starting base power. So for Zoro here, it's 5,000, but for Whitebeard, it would be 6,000. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm going to leave Whitebeard out of the discussion, especially since we're dealing with beginner players in this first section. Let's talk about 5,000 power leaders, because that is the overwhelming average of power for leaders. So let's talk about 5,000 power leaders. The first threshold you must reach if you want to deal damage to your opponent to where they lose 1 life is 5,000 power. Again, dealing with 5,000 power leaders. So in other words, any of these 3 cards right here in the middle, this Mino Rhinoceros, this Solitaire, and this Page 1, any of these 3 cards, if they were to attack into this Zoro, if the Zoro does not counter out, or in some way, you know, in some way block, then he is going to lose 1 life. Okay? So it's really that basic. That's just the first threshold, though. The second threshold is actually 7,000 power, not 6,000. It's 7. Why? Because ultimately, if I swing for 5,000 power at Zoro or 6,000 power at Zoro, he can use 1 card to get out of that. 1 2,000 power counter in hand can counter my entire attack. Or if I only swung for 5,000, a 1,000 power counter can block it. But a 7,000 power attack cannot be blocked by a 1,000 power counter or a 2,000 power counter. They would have to use 2 different counters that equaled 3,000 or more, or use an event, which we're happy about that as well, right? That's using very effective cards out of hand for not a very effective amount of power. So you do have to consider this. And if I haven't already mentioned it, or for the players who don't know, when it comes to countering, it's this number on the left here of page 1 where it says counter plus 1,000. If I were to attack this Zoro for 5,000, like with the Mino Rhinoceros, if he has a card in hand that has plus 1,000 counter or plus 2,000, then he can discard that to counter out of my attack, because a attack has to match or be higher to actually deal damage, whereas the blocker has to be at a higher power to survive the attack. Okay, so in other words, again, if we swing for 7,000 at this Zoro, he has to reach 8,000 to survive it. Okay, so what does it mean to attack wide and low to the ground? This is a very, very important concept. Notice Kaido on the right here. He's a 10 cost, 12,000 power character with an effect. Again, let's not worry about the effect right now. Let's worry more about this next situation over here on the right. So this costed, or in the middle, excuse me, not on the right. On the right here is Kaido that costs 10 Dawn, 10 resources. Well, guess what this costs altogether? 10 Dawn. Now, for the decks that want to swing wide and quote-unquote low to the ground, that means they want to have a bunch of low-cost characters who can attack multiple times. Multiple times. They're attacking wide. They're spreading wide and attacking a bunch of times at once. That's attacking wide and low to the ground. Whereas, like we talked about in last video, swinging tall would be like swinging with Kaido. Now, each characters have their benefits. Kaido is ultimately uncounterable, right? You would have to get to 13,000 power. That's plus 8,000 just to counter out of an attack from Kaido, right? Whereas with these other 3 guys here, you'd have to counter for 2,000 to get out of the 6,000 attack, and then 1,000 and 1,000 for the 2 5,000 attacks. Well, here's the thing. That can be done with 3 cards, right? So it would be 2,000 counter for the 6,000 attack, a 1,000 and a 1,000 that you can counter out of all 3 of these. Well, for that 2,000, 1,000, 1,000, that's only 4,000 power. You would need 4,000 more just to stop this one Kaido attack. Do you see how, like, they both have their perks? by swinging wide, you're going to be able to eat up a lot of cards from hand, or you're going to be eating up a lot of life cards, right? Because you start punching through damage. Whereas Kaido, you might punch through 1 point of damage, or they might just use one blocker and now they're done with it. Okay, but there is a balance to it, right? Notice what Kaido can do. Well, you probably can't read it, but he can bounce an 8 cost and a 3 cost. So if the board state was these 3 characters right here, if your opponent plays Kaido, and this is your board state, he could bounce your page 1 and your Mina Rhinoceros. And there goes that, right? Like there goes half your turn of what you just did, and now you're left with a 5,000, and your opponent has the 12,000 or whatever the case is. Okay, all right, so next up, I'm just going to read this. It's a mindset. Slow and steady is nice for some people, but for others, they would rather go fast. And here's the concept. I'm either going to win this game or I'm going to lose this game. So let's just get it over with as soon as possible, right? That's the idea there, right? I'm going to win or lose, so let's just get it over with. And the next idea is flood the board with threats and make your opponent figure it out. The very last thing I want to talk about is this quote from Mike Tyson. It's brutal, but it really gets the point across for an aggro deck. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. It's really that basic. So like you might be playing against a mid-range, let me go back, you might be playing against a mid-range deck where their plan is to develop and do this, that, and the other. You might be playing against a control deck that they're trying to manage your board and do this, that, and the other. Well, the aggro deck just says, no, I'm just gonna punch you right in the mouth. Yeah, I'm just gonna punch you, and I'm just gonna run you over. I'm gonna steamroll you, and we're gonna go from there. Good luck. So that's the major concept there. And once you understand this level of thinking, you can start to develop the idea of what an aggro deck does and cards that make an aggro deck go. Excuse me. So like with Gear 3, how double attack was really a really strong feature, and resilience was a strong feature of Gear 3, these high quality characters. Well, with the Gear 4 stuff, you're more interested in characters that buff. Like Nami and Magra, they're both characters that can buff your characters. Now, Magra can only buff a one cost character like Nami. But Nami, when you activate her character, she can give a Dawn to one of your other characters to make them stronger for the turn. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. My throat's drying out. So, the big keyword for Gear 4 for aggro decks is Rush. Luffy here, Zoro has it. Buffers like Nami and Magra are also a very strong feature in aggro decks. Cards like Diable Jambe, and there's other cards as well, but this one in particular makes your characters unblockable. So in other words, if you load up, 10 Dawn on, or let's just say you load up 9 Dawn on your Zoro, and they have a blocker. Well, normally they could just block that attack, and there goes your entire turn. Well, if you put 9 Dawn on Zoro and then use your last Dawn with Diable Jambe, they can no longer block him. It makes him unblockable. And the last really strong feature for aggro decks, and this kind of ties over into mid-range as well, actually, is the ability to restand your characters. That is very powerful. Okay, so just to kind of harp over what I'm saying here, the second deck archetype comes from Gear 4, and it takes up the scissors or aggro spot. As the name implies, production, you're trying to outproduce your opponent and provide as many threats as you can as to overwhelm them. Ultimately, we're dealing with quantity over quality with our mindset. And the sign of a skilled Gear 4 user, really pay attention to this. The sign of a skilled Gear 4 user is knowing when to attack and when not to attack, right? Or when to take another turn to set up a better attack. This is going to deny your opponent the chance to swing at your rested characters and take out your characters. So that's a very big deal, and that's something that it takes a long time to master that kind of restraint, because it's very tempting to swing with some of these characters, especially these 5-cost 6Ks or these rushers. You might need to hold back one turn and just further establish your board before playing the Luffy or Zoro. So, that's something you have to really start to master if you're at the intermediate level and you want to take it to the next level into expert. And speaking of the next level, first we're going to look at this 4th place deck. This deck went 8-1. Richard Yam piloting this one from the Play TCG's NA Online Regional. And notice how low the cost is in this deck compared to the Katakuri deck we looked at in Gear 3. and the even the Eustace Captain Kidd deck. And by the way, the Eustace Captain Kidd deck that we looked at was kind of a low-costed mid-range deck, in my opinion. Like it was catered to be a little more swinging wide. And this deck is like, excuse me, that's typically a feature of an aggro deck. But the Eustace Captain Kidd deck gets away with it in a different way because of its way to produce and put down blockers and to make you swing into certain characters. So this deck, on the other hand, runs no events, and it just swings wide. It just says, okay, I'm going to fill up the board, and I'm going to bash in as many characters as I can. And as you take out my little characters, I'm going to replace them with Marcos and Zoros and Luffys. And if you get rid of those two, well, I'm going to get ready for the next round, the next wave of attackers, because I'm going to find more of them with Nami, Izo, and Curly Dedan. These are all searchers for those who don't know. So very powerful, very low to the ground, aggressive list. And for those who don't know or don't remember, Zoro is going to buff all of your characters by 1,000 that are on the board just by attaching one Dawn to him, making him a 6,000 power attack. So that's potentially very strong. Very, very strong. Okay, and now let's look at one more deck. This is a little more confrontational. I know this is not like a straight-up aggro deck, but anyone who's played against Law knows that this deck is so strong that it can double over as an aggro deck or even like a mid-range deck, a low to the ground mid-range deck with a little bit of utility in its two events. It runs an equal amount of searches as what we just saw. That is the most common feature of an aggro deck that I've noticed is many searchers. Like there's 4 Namis, 4 Izos, and 4 Curly Dedans. Each one of these characters I just said has the effect of being able to search up a new card to replace it once you play it, right? So let's just say you searched with Nami and you grabbed a Zoro. Okay, well you have a 2,000 power character on the board who's going to get plus 1,000 from the leader's effect, and then you can buff him with Magra or Makino to get additional effects, or additional attacks off, right? And it already got you a new card to replace it in your hand with the Zoro we just talked about. Say you go Izo and you search up a Marco. Well, now after a while you can play this Marco and you see what's going on. It just has a lot of versatility, and it likes to spread the board as wide as possible and to sift through your deck and grab as many cards as possible to keep your onslaught with, because you're trying to outproduce your opponent. Remember, mid-range is trying to outdevelop. Aggro is trying to outproduce. Okay? So again, looking at the Trafalgar Law deck, this list went 9-0. Excuse me, and this was a very strong deck in the sense that you're filling up the board every turn. You have 4 searchers in Jewelry Bonnie, 4 searchers in Nami, and 4 searchers in Curly Dedan. And for those who know how Law works, I don't need to explain it anymore. But for the players who don't, I'm at least going to explain it. Trafalgar Law, the leader's ability, allows you to pull back cards and play cards from hand. And then, if the card happens to be this Trafalgar Law, you can do it again. So you're getting multiple functions, multiple uses of your Namis, your Curly Dedans, and your Jewelry Bonnies. And it just becomes very overwhelming very quickly, where they generate so much value that it becomes hard to keep up with. And I won't go into it here, but I've talked about it in the past. Trafalgar Law, as of OP03, well, now we're going into OP04, we're in OP04, excuse me. Like, as of OP04, Trafalgar Law was effectively the only leader that was winning tournaments with 4 life or less, right, is the idea. Like, well, I should just say with 4 life. Like, he was the only character that was doing that. Now in the West, after many restrictions, well, not many, after a few big restrictions, yes, now we're starting to see like Queen top tournaments, and we're starting to see Doflamingo top tournaments. But realistically, up until OP03, Trafalgar Law was the only deck that was really winning the big tournaments. That was a 4 life leader. And I do think there's a reason for that. I think his ability and the way this deck is made is almost broken. But anyway, again, I don't want to go too much into detail there. But with the aggro decks, the feel of them is very much like I'm going to just gonna get the board as wide as I can, and I'm just gonna will you down, you know, 5,000 or 7,000, like 5,000 attacks or 7,000 attacks at a time. Okay, so all right, that's about it, guys. Hopefully that explained it. If I missed anything, please don't forget to, you know, please comment in the comment section below and help me out. You know, gosh, I'm like starting to slur, guys. In the comment section below, you know, please help me out. And if I didn't explain something, please, like, you know, ask away, and I'll try to sort it out down there. I hope you guys enjoyed, and like I've already said, when it comes to taking your game to the expert level in any of these styles, you see, hopefully I'm being very clear on this. The mid-range aggro and control decks, the way that you get to expert level is by putting in the reps. So notice what that does. That means, okay, I need to dedicate time to just playing straight up control decks or straight up aggro decks or straight up mid-range decks. Now, yes, your Gear 1 knowledge memorization, you know, that is very easy to acquire. It just has to do with memorizing and reading and remembering things. But Gears 2 through 5 have a lot to do with getting your reps in. Like, play the game, play it out, and enjoy. Okay, hopefully that was enough, guys. What was I gonna say? Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and join the Discord if you want to hang out with us on there. And until next time, peace.